Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Hans Ibelings, and I'm moderating tonight. Welcome to this Daniel's talk, Strange Primitivism and Other Things. Before I start, I would like to announce the presence of our Dean, Rob Wright. Rob, please give her an introduction.
Hello and welcome to the second event of our Daniel's Faculty's 2020-21 talks and lecture series entitled Resolutions and Agencies. My name is Rob Wright. I'm the Dean of the Faculty at the Daniel's Faculty. And as we start all our meetings, I first wish to acknowledge this land upon which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful for the opportunity to work on this land. Daniel's honors Indigenous peoples, past and present and future, here and around the world, and we wish to pay a respect to all the elders on this land and other lands from where our guests are visiting from. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Hans.
Thank you very much, Rob. I would like to introduce the two guests we have today, who are both colleagues from Daniel's. Tei Carpenter, she teaches at Daniel's, and she has her office between New York and Toronto, Agency. And that's a firm that's working on a wide variety of scales, from very large projects to fascinating small ones like hacking the water system of New York on the smallest level possible, with kind of special water fountain. We're here for the occasion of the book presentation of Adrian, Strange Primitivism. Adrian Phiffer teaches at Daniel's as well and has his office called Office of Adrian Phiffer. I am Hans Ibelings and I'm teaching at Daniel's as well, and I am the editor and publisher of the Architecture Observer, and I am the publisher of Adrian's book. I'm not making books because I'm a publisher, but I'm a publisher because I want to make books. And one of the books I really want to make was one with Adrian, which turned out to become Strange Primitivism. As a publisher and editor, one's role is often almost invisible. And in this case, it was truly invisible because Adrian was just making his book. And I try to do the same here as the moderator. So as long as it goes well, you won't hear too much from me. And I will leave it to Tei and Adrian to have a conversation. And since we're talking about a book, I think it's important for a book to be read. And I'm very happy that Adrian is willing to read some parts from his own book, Strange Primitivism. So Adrian, please start.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Thank you first, Rob, for everything, for all of your support. It's really wonderful. And thank you, Hans, for this introduction. I'll just first share my presentation so we have some visuals, I guess. Just a second. Perfect. And I guess even though I haven't won the Oscar and or the Pritzker Prize, I think for me this is the right moment to kind of read my long list of thank yous. First with Hans for his incredible patience and guidance. He has been really absolutely wonderful in this process and dealing with all the chaos that I can generate. I want to also thank to the graphic designers Sonia and Pascal from Hallerbrunn in Amsterdam. Incredible work. I want to thank to Mason White for organizing this as well to Nini Brody. Also, thank you to my former teachers and now colleagues, Robert Levitt and Rodolfo Kouri, for the and I'll say often very painful criticism they provided throughout the years. And somehow every time I'm building up this list of thank you, my friends, my talented friends from JA Architecture Studio, Begnaza Sadi and Nima Javidi come to mind. So I'd like to thank them as well. I'm almost at the end. I'd also like to thank my collaborators, Angela Cho, Matthew Leander Khalil, Avi Odenheimer, Shirin Rohani, and Dimitrios Karopoulos. They are former classmates and former students, and I think through them and through the interaction with the Daniels and faculty and students, it's such an important part of my work. This past years have been marked by that. And last but not least, I want to thank former Dean Richard Zomer for his help and support in realizing this project. And of course, thank you, Tei, for taking on this strange project. So I think what I'll try to do in a few slides is first to give you a taste of the book, and hopefully I won't spoil it for you, and you'll still find some joy in reading it after this event. And after that, I'll just flip through a few spreads in a silent mode. I'll read the text and then we'll get going with Tei's questions and remarks. This is a small book, and I always dreamed of making a small book because I was in a way not aiming to do a real architectural book, but I'm not sure if you guys can see the first slide with the book. No? Let's see. How about now? Let me just share it again. Yeah? All right. So first of all, this is a very small book. Many people have been surprised to receive the book and see how tiny it is. I guess I was never really aiming to make an architecture book. I was actually aiming to make an architecture that comments, make a book that comments on architecture. The book it's a collection of fragments, and it's also, I think, an effort to almost change the character of the book as you flip through almost every 10 pages, or I'll say almost with every page. It is a collection of fragments that actually has somehow a strange ambition to become a novel, and I was interested in the literary aspect of this project. Of course, was interested for me to also create some sort of a new territory that all the images and the text can build up, almost like a flat surface that that kind of new things can emerge. The apparent chaos of the book, it's actually governed by a series of strict rules that I'll say, Dutch people can imagine and can give life to, and Sonia and Pascal have put forward a system that actually allows to explore the field of images by a gradual zooming in and zooming out, where throughout the spreads things are being repeated or re-emphasized, things are being cropped, and with every spread, I think the book for myself opened up new vistas in what I was actually doing. The book comes with 4 covers. I guess comes with 4 covers because it was economically possible to do this. But also as a way, I guess I didn't care about the cover, or I think it's unimportant. And just because of that that decision, the covers have become something quite interesting, I'll say, because you get the classical cover with the face of the hero on the front, but you also get a cover that of primitivism, the shape of a year in a black on a black background. There are also some grotesque moments that one can discover with these books, or maybe just a chick, which is slightly meaningless. I guess I always thought that this book could always exist without any images and just with the text. So maybe that's the underline here. I'll just exit this full screen actually right now. I don't know what happens now, but should be good. Just want to do one more thing. So I'll just flip through a few spreads, and then I'll stop at some point and read you something. This is supposed to somehow give you a sense of what is the book. I'm discussing here, I believe, things that are important, but also things that are not very important. There is sometimes some sort of a kamikaze action in the book. And I guess I just thought that it is important to, in a way, with the book to reveal as much as possible and maybe find uncomfortable moments in order to move forward. So we have a series of texts that we have decided to read, that I'm going to read. Hopefully this won't be very, very, very embarrassing, but I'll start with the first text, and I think this will kick off the discussion. Project for a Facade. For the 2016 Venice Biennale, I was part of a group of architects invited to reimagine the facade of Kazumasa Yamashita's house with a face. The invitation stated, "We invite you all to design another front elevation for Yamashita's house, your very own face of the house." I always take things literally. My initial proposal was my face. I don't particularly like myself, but in the context of working on meaningless projects, I thought that the idea was meaningful. Therefore, I projected my face on one side of the building. The crop was tight and done in such a way as to insinuate another shape for my head, or better said, to confuse the viewer. You don't know if you are looking at the house or at the head. With my eyes positioned at the second level and my mouth at ground level, the nose ended up being a fatty shape at the first level of the building. It was useless. It had no function. It just dominated the entire facade like a supervisor of a brothel. This is not the case when you see my real face, my real head. My eyes were windows. They stared with a slight strabismus. Their color was undefined. Underneath them, asymmetrical wrinkles added further notes of strangeness to the facade. My mouth at ground level was closed in an expression that only an introvert can possess. It made for a bizarre door. One had to bend and crawl and push up and down the lips to enter. It was a real effort to get in because this mouth did not open very often. The facial hair looked working class. It delineated a rusticated ground floor, which implied the presence of a piano nobile. The eyebrows in themselves did nothing for this facade, but they composed beautifully with the high vertical wrinkle in the center of my forehead. Overall, all the elements worked out well together. And I personally thought they made up a promising project for a facade. The eyes, the nose, the mouth, the facial hair, the eyebrows, the wrinkles, all mine. The sense of confidence with the project ended during my first trip to the bathroom, where I met a mirror. Then and there, I realized that I always take things literally. In conclusion, for the Venice Biennale 2016, I propose a blank facade.
Okay, Tei, you've read the book from cover to cover. What do you think of a text like this?
There, I was waiting for Adrian to put the image up. There's so much suspense. Well, I mean, so first, I think thank you for the invitation to be part of the conversation. I know that this has been an endeavor for a long time for both of you. And, you know, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to really sort of sit with the book for a long period of time. And I think, you know, Adrian, I think I first encountered you virtually through Instagram, you know, through your sort of your Office of Adrian Phiffer Instagram as, you know, one of your 20,000 followers or so. And, you know, I think I've been really lucky to be a colleague of yours at Daniels, I think, teaching the second semester. I think you're a particularly generous and rigorous colleague, a demanding colleague. So, you know, so I think today what I'm hoping is that between me and Hans, and I think some of our attendees, we can maybe tease out some of the ideas and the themes of your book, and hopefully have a conversation all together about the book. And, you know, Adrian and I have kind of loosely tried to structure the talk around a set of readings. So I think Adrian chose a handful, and then I chose a handful to try to sort of tease the conversation along. But I just want to say that, you know, those of you who are in the audience as attendees, you know, please feel free to jump in with questions and ask questions throughout and participate in the conversation. You can use the chat function. And so don't feel as though you have to wait till the very end to ask the questions. And hopefully we can bring you into the conversation as we're going. So, you know, I think, so Adrian showed you a few images of the book. And for those of you who haven't seen the book, indeed, it's kind of a brick. It's a sort of dense brick, and it's actually satisfyingly light and satisfying to hold. And I think I have the classical cover with the hero image. And there's a sort of modesty to the book that I think is quite interesting. And I think, you know, when I pulled it out of its package, it reveals this kind of chiaroscuro portrait of Adrian. You know, his profile, his eye kind of in profile, this, you know, staring out of this sort of frame of facial hair. And I think there's a sort of interesting oscillation here between the tonal abstraction of your face, right, and the kind of realism of the actual pores and the actual thingness of your face. And I think it really is, for me, it sort of sets up the book in a way. It produces a sort of suspense, you know, like a film noir film. You know, because in a sense, you're opening up the book, but I think in reality, you're really kind of opening up this mind of Adrian Phiffer when you turn the pages. So I put together a couple sort of loose remarks just to start off. And then I think we can kind of get into the conversation. And I certainly have a bunch of questions. So I think, you know, more Buñuel than SML-XL. The book is really an anti-monograph. It's full of contradictions, beautiful contradictions, I think. It's at once exquisitely beautiful, vividly uncanny, disconcertingly honest, I think sometimes frustratingly impenetrable and circular. It's innocent, yet knowingly dark, provoking the reader with a stunning scale of production, and I think also a stunning kind of willingness to experiment with the medium of architecture. But one, I think, can't quite settle on a kind of singular way to read the book, or even to read the work, or to read the author. And this is certainly not a kind of self-congratulatory marketing effort of some architecture books, right? Trying to wrap things up in a neat bow. There's certainly no elevator pitch, and I think that there's a kind of refreshingness to that. it kind of leaves the reader searching for some form of resolution, I think, in the book. And I think perhaps what Adrian might be suggesting is a problem maybe of resolution and maybe even of finality in this time of instability, and also sort of a saturation of media, particularly for a younger generation, or, you know, I think Adrian is a self-described, quote, youngish architect. Adrian, we can maybe talk more about the term youngish later, and who qualifies. But I think, you know, I think for me, it's interesting that you talk about the book as a novel, or having a kind of novella-like quality. I think for me, it's a sort of cinematic enterprise. Really, it reminds me of something like Jim Jarmusch's film One Night on Earth, you know, where you have these sort of episodic chapters. There's a non-linear, but maybe parallel narratives that each contribute maybe in their own way to this sort of assemblage of stories, of moods, maybe of images, of experiences, I think of ruminations. I think you get a sense of that as you're flipping through, and hopefully we can see you continue to flip through a little bit today. But, you know, I think that assemblage produces a kind of portrait, at least for the film, it's a portrait of a night. But I think I would say that this becomes a kind of portrait of a person. So, you know, I think like Project for Facade, the chapter that you just read from the book, you know, in which, like, even in the drawing, there's this flattening of the author, of the building, of the representation into one. I think the book itself is actually a self-portrait in some sense, certainly not the monograph, but a kind of self-portrait. And it has this very deadpan tone, a very sort of deadpan tone. And I think it expresses the convictions of an architect, and, you know, one which I'd like to talk more about this too, this sort of possibility of the multiple personality. I think you talk about Norman Bates at some point from Psycho, but the sort of the multiple personalities that are also maybe even interspersed with, you know, moments of doubt, of self-loathing even, that can really come with, of pessimism too, right? Which really come with endeavors of creativity, and also come with endeavors of working alone. And I think this is something that we don't talk about as architects often. And so I think for me, I think the book just to sort of start off, I think the book is not so much about individual projects. And I think maybe we don't talk so much about individual projects today. It's not so much about individual projects of an architect, but maybe it's about the project of a book, or even, I think, you know, the existential project of being an architect. Somehow, I think that's for me how I was reading the book. So, you know, I thought maybe we could just start by asking you, Adrian, you know, why a book now? And what was the impetus for producing the book at this moment?
Wow, Tei, this is such an amazing reading of the book, and in a way, I wish you could keep talking, and we are at the end, and we can close the whole presentation. Because this event, it's incredibly hard to do, at least for me. In a way, because the book itself says everything that is to be said, and I feel that I'll start to sound redundant by sometimes by answering some of the questions. But I do like your question about why a book now, and I think on one hand it emerges out of an affinity that I have towards books. And owning books. I'll say that I am a fan of buying books. I'll try, and of course I don't get to read all of them. So there is also an ambition here of asking myself, can I write a book? And this has been the answer. And I think, third of all, why a book now and why in this context is because, and why sometimes the book takes some pessimistic or satirical tones is because I feel there is too much hysteria in maybe in our profession, or there is also some sort of masked PR actions all the time, and I felt it will be good to write a book that somehow speaks from some sort of revelatory point of view, to just to reveal my condition, not the so by no means this book should be taken as a generalization of the whole profession. It's just how I see things from my own point of view.
I would say that there is an interesting aspect to it, which you're slightly evading now, and you've been evading it in our discussions about making the book. And it's actually mentioned by Tei when she says that there's this existential part of being an architect and making a book. And I think maybe you should say something about, because on the one hand, you're extremely modest about it, but at the same time, it's a reflection of your ambition to be seen and to give your projects a life. Even if you didn't win a competition, you still want to have it in a book and present it somehow.
Yes, I mean, the word strange, I think it reflects maybe the connection with the Stranger of Albert Camus, the character that meets himself in a mirror and wonders, has a moment of lucidity, which is also the moment of absurdity. So I do think that the process of writing this book has been a process of facing a mirror and looking at those reflections and then putting them out there. And I think the presence of the projects that I have done so far, I guess are present just as minor reflections again of me as a character, as an architectural character.
And Adrian, I was curious too, how do you think that the book fits into your kind of production of your own work? Do you see it as, I guess my bigger question is like, is it finished? Or how do you know when it was finished? And like, if the book is a kind of complete part of your work, or if it's a reflection of your work?
I think it's just one of the many projects that I'm doing. So I do look at it as a project, and with the office, we have engaged in various projects that range from, of course, from doing renderings to writing texts to making movies to participating in competitions to teaching. So it's I would say it's just a project. And I do think that it's also a finished project. I will, in the sense that probably the next book will be unexpectedly different.
Maybe it's time to read another piece from the book, Adrian.
Okay, I guess we
Perfect.
can. I'll just flip through once again to see this beautiful projects, and I'll get to in a second. I'll be there. So again, I quite enjoy this cropping that that is achieved in the book. Quite wonderful. Some interesting spreads. And I'm getting very close. The second text that I like to read, it's Strange Primitivism. It's just because the book it's also titled Strange Primitivism. I was accused of practicing a strange primitivism. I was also part of a conference titled Young Ancients. I like the accusation. Primitivism is the outcome of my need for legibility, but legibility in itself is uninteresting, as it only teases my senses of familiarity. I dislike familiarity in architecture. Onto the legible, now perceived as primitivism, I always add one or two or more layers. They take form in material application, spatial dispositions, morphological analogies, identity transfers, shifted atmospheres, and exaggerated repetitions. They are third interventions that lead to a strange primitivism, which is nothing else than a form of architectural essay made up of many parts.
Great, thanks, Adrian. So from what I understand with the title, it sounds like the title of the book is a sort of descriptor of how your work has been referred to by others. I think you say accused as the term. And I think in architecture, the term primitivism, or let's say the primitive, is often linked to geometry, transformations of form, let's say. And I think this could maybe be tied to how you describe primitivism through legibility as a kind of visual clarity. But I kind of want to go back for a second, because I think that the term primitivism has it has an ideologically charged history in the development of 20th century European and American art. And I'm thinking about someone like Matisse, let's say, looking at African art at the time to inform their own work. And I'm thinking in particular, there was kind of controversial exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art called Primitivism in the 20th Century, or Primitivism in 20th Century Art by William Rubin in '84, which is really harshly critiqued because of cultural issues tied to colonialism, domestication of the other, removal of the art objects from context, and this sort of aesthetic appropriation. And I know that, from how I understand it, there's a kind of break in the understanding of primitivism, let's say, in that context, and then the context that and how we talk about it with architecture. But I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit more about the title and the term primitivism in this context, and how you've thought about that history and now the kind of use of that term in architecture.
And then maybe related to that, there's a question from someone who asked who was the accuser. Adrian? If you
maybe I vaguely, it's after many drinks. So I don't want to accuse back anyone. So it's, I guess, a group of friends. That's the answer to the question, who was the accuser. I think primitivism, it's actually the Romanian side of my, of me. For those that don't know, I am originally from Romania, and I spent long periods in the countryside, in the post-communist countryside, Romanian countryside, surrounded by many animals and also many objects forgotten from that period. And I can only speak about the primitivism that it's in my work, or the way that it's also why I'm bringing it up here is because I literally see that it's tied to just my experiences as a kid, the way that I experienced the world and the first interactions, and there's a certain brutality and honesty in those interactions that I think for me are relevant.
Oh, and
so
then
it does.
In addition to this, we have been searching for a title for quite a long time, and it even ended up being the possible title of the book could be. It was not immediately obvious that this would be the title. And so there's a certain randomness to it as well, just as the images are treated in a almost random way as background noise. And it's what I see, and I don't want to analyze you, Adrian, but there's a kind of destructive side to you, which can also lead to those kinds of titles, I think.
Destructive. I mean, I'll try to, I'll think about an answer to that side, but because I'm trying very hard to not get into the process of psychoanalysis of who I am, but I think it's just important to sometimes destroy, not to destroy, just to have some sort of an action of erasure or destruction or of reinterpretation in order to continue. And at least for me, that's why it's important to destroy certain things, to cut them into little pieces, such as it's happening right now with the images in this book.
I think that maybe also relates to something I was thinking about. In that text, you talk about your dislike of familiarity, which I was reading as a kind of dislike of universalism. And, you know, instead it seems as though there's this, you know, kind of like working of the image. There's a sort of project that's away from a kind of purity or a kind of like knownness. And so for you, I was wondering, like, with this process of a layering, a kind of adding of layers, a kind of working of the images, is this a kind of treatment process or more of a kind of bricolage, assemblage process, and how you're kind of, I guess you're saying destroying, I'm sort of thinking more of a like processing, layering kind of approach.
I think it's probably a process that in a way tries to mimic a productive chaos, that you introduce new forces into the process. And I think in our case, we work mainly on design competitions. So it's rare that we get in front of a client that can add all these external layers. So the layers that I am introducing in my work with the collaborators in the office, it's just a way to destabilize everything, because I just find absolutely not impossible, but I find in a way irrelevant to be totally coherent. And I guess this is my reaction to the current situation that we're living today.
No, but there's still an interesting paradox in that sense, that you're producing and you're paying so much attention to the production of beautiful and well-composed images. And at the same time, you're treating them in an almost indifferent way in this book by making them all equal. So this absence of hierarchy is something that's really intriguing me.
It also makes me think of this, I think it's this interview with Joseph Beuys, where I think he said something like, there's a deep misunderstanding amongst people that art should be understood through logical sentences. Right, I mean, that's kind of how I'm understanding what you're saying, is that there's something about the chaos, the kind of distrust even of coherence almost in the work. And I'm sorry, you might be going through a little bit of a psychoanalysis this evening, whether you like it or not. Between
I'll make sure that at the end the image is very blurry.
There's a question from Mason White. How important is humor in your process and work? Do you think it can exist in practice?
Of course, I think that's probably one of the few things that is really missing today. Humor and a sense of lightness that we also have to work with, because there is such a discrepancy between how one experiences the architects in person and how they display themselves outside. And of course, it's for all the good reasons. But I will move from the idea of humor to the idea of sarcasm, which I think it's also a wonderful concept to work with. I am extremely sarcastic with my own work.
But can you elaborate on what sarcastic architecture is?
Sarcastic architecture. I think sarcastic architecture might be some sort of a concept that alludes or emulates the Dada concept of the world and what happens in this world, which I think it's way more interesting than a surrealist way of looking at the world. So it's kind of taking all the dirt in and making something out of it. And I guess it's also some sort of a project on indifference.
I wonder if that's a good transition to the next reading, Adrian, I think.
Yes.
In terms of the kind of the question of sarcasm and humor even.
Yeah. I am, so I'll go back to the third text. It's my first building. The first building I remember is the National Theatre of Catalonia by Ricardo Bofill. I remember it as a temple, I believe a Roman temple, wrapped in a high-tech glass curtain wall. I remember it because it did not make any sense. It felt blasphemous. The encounter with that building ended all the conviction I had on what the building should be or do. Then and there, I realized that the building is not so much about how it makes you feel, but how it makes you think. That building by Bofill made me think that architecture belongs to no time or place, and that it will be wrong to think architecture as the outcome of consistency or having rules. This architecture is here and now, but it could just as well be someplace else at another time.
No, I like the juxtaposition of this text with the images of this, I think is it the Warming Huts project?
Yes.
Yeah. You know, the sort of design of the set of cloaks and these warming blankets and the sort of distribution system as the architectural response to a call for a temporary shelter from the cold. So I think it's, you know, I don't know if it's sarcastic, but it's sort of like radically sensible, or there's sort of it's both really radical, but then also kind of mundane. And I sort of feel like in your work, there's the aspiration to bridge those two things somehow. But I think, I mean, I was curious with this text also about when you talk about architecture that doesn't belong to a time or a place. Because, you know, the work in the book maybe is like adjacent to the present, but maybe somehow outside of time. Perhaps that would be my reading of it. And so I'm sort of curious for you, you know, how you approached the concept of time in the work and maybe its relationship to reality or to a reality.
I mean, maybe it will be good to go back to some of, I think I skipped to some of the images called, I don't know, for some reason I'm skipping them, the beautiful renders of the house that I cannot find them right now, almost there, or maybe not. Anyways, I think I'm also trying to avoid the answer by flipping through the book right now. how do I approach the concept of time? Is by trying to render time. That's why I guess I'm trying very hard to get to this which I can't seem to find them now. 245. Not here. I can't seem to find them now because I like to show things as clear as possible, and I guess I'm also trying to enter a zone of representation that it's somehow not that it's totally honest. So, for example, we did this project for a house here in Toronto that it didn't turn out so well, but the images that we have presented are the ones of rotten concrete that displays all the stains from the rain and snow. And because of that render of ugliness, there were so many people that believe that these things are real. And most of those people were actually architects. So it's kind of a funny contradiction there, how things such as rendering maybe the ugliness that appears with time makes things real in this world, in this digital world.
There's, by the way, a question which maybe reflects back to this discussion about sarcasm. It's a beautiful question. Does architecture make room for the business of vulnerability?
The business of?
Vulnerability.
Honorable, to be honorable?
Vulnerable.
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 I wouldn't recommend it to my students, because it's I feel that it's very much about and not only with our profession, with every profession, it's about how do you display this full control of the things that you are doing, that you offer a sense of predictability. So I think there is room for it only if you can really make out a project out of it, if you can make a project out of it.
And
otherwise,
do you this book as a project in that sense of vulnerability?
Yes. I think it's this book also comes probably at the end of a period of 10 years where I have tried different things, and in order to move forward, you have to expose yourself to really gain that friction that allows for the next project.
And then that relates maybe to another question we have, is that which is asking if you've noticed post-publishing that perhaps you would have done things differently, and if you have a different idea now on the production of the book itself and on your own work, the past projects. In other words, seeing the work together, did it change your idea about it?
No, I think I don't think I will. I don't think I will change anything about the book itself right now. Looking at it, I mean, there are parts of the text that I wish I could write again. But that's not so important right now. So the answer, the brutal answer will be no. I think it's the book in a way. It feels like a period at the end of a sentence. and I do prefer with every project to move on as quickly as possible, because I think at least for me, the possibility it's in the next project, not in the past project.
I was curious, like maybe also we could open it up a little bit to Hans and Adrian to talk, just jumping off from that question about the process of collaboration, and even the decision-making process of, what to include. I mean, there's this sort of amazing grouping of imagery. It's like personal snapshots, it's personal work, student work, kind of like B-sides almost from your studio, the kind of behind the scenes imagery. There's also, like YouTube lecture stills. I think there's like a Rage Against the Machine CD cover somewhere hidden in there. And then there's this sort of overall graphic language of fragmentation and this zoom in and zoom out. So I was curious, like as, talking that maybe the two of you could sort of speak a little bit about the, like where do you start, where do you end? And at this moment also reflecting back on where you are, like how is it where you started, or how was the sort of process, the evolution of the process?
I can jump in and I can tell you that this project would not have been possible without Hans, and not because he's the publisher or anything like that, but just his role as an editor and in dealing with myself as a first-time writer, like really naive writer, and all these things, and kind of allow for things to occur has been just unbelievably good. So I guess for the third time, thank you, Hans.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. I would add to that without you, the book wouldn't have been there either. So it's for me, I think what was important is that as soon as I realized that you were willing to be brutally honest, that I think everything we discussed was always with that goal in mind, that it would be no, let's say, sugarcoating, no self-promotion. And I think that really worked. And Tei, you mentioned the images. The funny thing is that we hardly spoke about what to do with the images. At some point, it was clear that there would be images in the book, but it was all about the writing of the text. And I think the fact that the graphic designers came up with this idea for this system, which is, it's a system, but it's treating the images randomly without even looking at them. It's just scanning pages in a particular way and zooming in and zooming out, and just creating the sequence of images without any, and the sequence of the images is based on how Adrian was offering them folders of images, and the numbering of within a folder was the numbering on the sheet of paper. So it sounds almost dismissive, but nobody looked at the images almost. It was like the images, they were being processed in a very abstract, systematic way. And that's why we have this book. And the effect is that, especially where different projects meet and where one chapter ends like this and the next start, that you have this very bizarre combination of text and image, which I think really added a great quality to this book. You have all those strange encounters between words and images. So as far as I remember, I'm always really bad at recalling a process. I only know the outcome. But I think we mainly spoke about text and not about anything else.
But that's so surprising. That's so surprising.
I had zero control over this book, Tei. I was faced with this layout, and it was kind of quite wonderful that, again, I didn't have to worry about it. Was kind of self-generating. And I think that also speaks about, again, about things that are important for me and in my practice of architecture, of simply accepting things from outside. I think my projects at moments look also different from project to project. It's because I'm working with different collaborators, and those presences are incredibly important in the process, and those voices work towards different projects. So not all the time I am there as well, but it's the same thing here. Just in a way, allowing the people who have designed this book to really design it.
No, and in addition to that, I can also say that all the books that I publish as the Architecture Observer, they all have a kind of similar identity. So we stay with the same graphic design. Also because that's my personal allergy, that there are too many books where the graphic design becomes an illustration of the content of the book. And I think it's really nice, and it works really well for Adrian's work, just to present it within this very rigid order that I have imposed on all my books, which offers little leeway for variation. And I think it worked really, really well here.
Yeah, I was curious too, the sort of the diversity of the representation and the imagery. Let's say, I think that there's something about that. I mean, in the book, but then I think also just in terms of how, you know, I think there's like the hyperreal renderings, but then there's also the watercolors, and then there's also the woodblock prints, or the woodblock, almost like hand carved woodblock prints. And, you know, I was sort of curious in terms of this line that you walk between representations. Is this, there's this line between contemporary technique and then almost a kind of irony, or I'm not sure if it's an irony or not, of certain techniques. And I was sort of curious if you could talk a little bit about that, like if you think about that as a project in and of itself, or if it's almost more as though you think about them as like your periods of work. You know, I'm thinking about the kind of painterly, you know, the blue period, let's say, of Picasso, or, you know, and that's when Adrian such and such period is when he was doing the woodblock prints, or, you know, how do you think about that as something synthetic or not to your work?
There is a bit of intention in the representation of every project, for sure, and I think in the past years that intention has gravitated towards making models and working with physical models. You know, so that's kind of an intentional part, but at the same time, when I'm working with somebody, I'm paying very much attention to their skills, and that becomes a factor in deciding where to drive the representation of things. At the same time, there is, let's just say, there are the periods that occur as I'm moving ahead, and of course, these periods have to do with how I like to display myself, how I like to display my projects, how can I win a project. You show that you have done a physical model, it means you have worked hard, and maybe the jury will pay a little bit more attention, which is definitely not the case. And then at the same time, the whole package of imagery that has been done in the office in the past 10 years is indeed a project in itself, and a commentary on again, some sort of a commentary on the contemporary situation of representing architecture. and I am really trying to produce comments on the hyperrealism. I'm trying to produce comments on being always correct. I'm trying to produce comments on you know, always portraying the perfect architecture, and going back to showing that there are moments of insane doubt, vulnerability that one experiences in the design process.
Let's go to another piece, Adrian.
And we've got some questions too that we can sort of integrate into the after you read the next piece.
Okay, so this is a hopefully not very long piece. It's called The Flat Side of Design. Everyone remembers Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. Who remembers Easy Star All Star's Dark Side of the Moon? The Flat Side of Design is the name of my architecture rendering business. As opposed to other rendering offices that bear futuristic names, Mir, Luxigon, Laptop, D-Box, Techmark, I have decided for a self-explanatory name that deals with the only reality associated with the image, that of being flat. Everything else implied by an architectural rendering does not exist yet. This approach is important for someone who is concerned with the concept of honesty in architectural representation and life in general. The purpose of the name is to constantly remind you that you are simply looking at an image. The application of the concept in the making of the image proves to be a bit more difficult given the commercial pressure from our clients. My technique is brutal. Ordinary values associated with the making of commercial architectural imagery, happy people, blue sky, clean sidewalks, healthy trees, in general, any element that points to an aseptic photorealism are ignored. The aim is to create images that incorporate signs of flat existence, signs unrelated to the content of the image. Small mistakes appear here and there, a straight lasso cut with zero sfumato touch, solids without shadows, texture styled abusively. These are points to access to the work. The image is not an object of consumption, and the effort here is to establish a distance between viewer and image. It is an effort to carve out a much needed space for reflection. This approach has precedent. If you listen to Glenn Gould playing Bach Goldberg variation, there are moments where he hums as he plays the piano. In Alejandro Inarritu's The Revenant, the steam of actors' breath often condenses on the camera lenses. Barnett Newman's Ornament 1, it's another example that can be accessed only by understanding the presence of the painter's hand. In all cases, the means of constructing the work rather than the work itself are the element that matters most. Of course, these three examples belong to the world of art. To conclude, the flat side of design is not a successful business. Yeah.
Sort of non-plug for your business, Adrian. No, I mean, I think that this is a really key part of the project or of the book is this the hand and the kind of willingness or the insistence on seeing the hand of the artist or seeing your own hand. And because I think it seems like in the work there's this really deep investment in the tools of digital technology or even analog representation, but there's also this desire to almost unravel and reveal those tools instead of producing a kind of seamless or sanitized imagery. And so I think that those images of the Semblance House, I think, with the rotting concrete come to mind. I love these images where you have the red lines from the client where you have to pick them up. But I think just this question of like I think the role of how representation and that the image in itself is the project as much as the project itself. Like I feel like that's something that I really took away from reading the book and sort of like understanding the work. We have a couple of questions. Hans, should we
Yeah, let's go to Haitham Daoudi's question about the readability of the message maintained in contrast with mystification and wonderment. Can you say something about that, Adrian?
Wow.
That's a great question.
Incredible question. Do you mind repeating that, Hans?
How is the readability of the message maintained in contrast with mystification and wonderment? So I think if I summarize and simplify it, is this kind of to which extent are you able to reveal something while at the same time reveal the message while at the same time hiding something of what you're doing?
I think that first of all, this is an absolutely beautiful question that is impossible to answer, or at least I cannot answer it. Just because the answer to such a question will sound like delivering some sort of formula, I feel, and I don't have any formulas, so I'll say it happens just by accident.
All right.
I am aware that this is completely unsatisfying as an answer.
But there's one Matthew James saying Trojan horse. Is that helpful to get towards an answer?
No, I think it's maybe if I can answer, it's because at least I don't consider things separately. And in a way, everything is being taken in account, at least from my position, everything is being taken in account at the same time. So there is this thick moment of many layers that occur exactly at the same time, and where I can represent certain things. I can send an image and also amplify some sort of myth, the myth of, I guess, Sisyphus, maybe. Is that a little bit better?
For me it is, but maybe not for Haitham. I was thinking especially in terms of conveying a message of urgency.
Yes.
Thank you for the answer. Okay, let's go to the question of Fionn Byrne. I read your book alone. Like most books I read alone. Should architecture be experienced alone or with others?
Or without?
With others, alone or with others?
I mean, first of all, hi Fionn, a very good friend from Vancouver. I think architecture should be experienced in both ways. Whatever makes you happy in a way, whatever gives you equilibrium.
That's all you want to say about it?
I think so. I'm a little bit. I guess I'm a little bit abrupt with these answers. Maybe. I guess as maybe I'm trying to put up a shield because I have revealed too much.
I don't think you have revealed too much, and I think part of it, the complication is that you're supposed to say something about the project, whereas the project is in itself the answer to what you want to say, or the problem that you face. So reflecting on the project and reflecting on the book is asking you to give a commentary on something that you consider complete. So
yes, I will say the reflection has happened during the production of the book, and now that it's printed, it's done, it's out in the world.
evaporated.
Yes. Thank you
Oops.
for helping me out.
Urgent question from Richard Summer, how your books are organized in your bookcase that we see now here.
By
And also,
color.
where will your book sit in this? He's also asking.
Next to this big provoking one.
You're probably next to on ugliness. And also definitely against a book such as Room for Artifacts. So in between the Room for Artifacts and on ugliness.
All right, shall we do another reading?
Yes, sure, I can.
Anyone who wants to add a question or comment, please do so.
I think Mason had a question also earlier.
Yeah.
There's one still from Mason. You mentioned recently that the only project that mattered to you is the recent one in Montreal. Why?
Well, I guess Mason, I'll not go with you for coffee again ever. I think it's you judge sometimes your work based on what happens in the world. And I do experience a feeling of meaningless with most of the projects that I have done in reference to what's going on in the world right now. And I thought that the project in Montreal, it's some sort of a just a good reflection of maybe on the idea of an architect, the idea of publicness, the idea of social justice, the idea of climate crisis, the idea of what is the meaning of form in the city. So that's why I thought that with that project, which is actually the result of a incredible collaboration with Trans-Solar engineers, with Silman engineers, with our colleague Francesco, and with a number of people that I mentioned before. That project turned out to be what is, in my opinion, where I like to go from now on.
So before you start reading about the chapter, My Practice of Architecture, maybe you can answer the question from Naomi Kries, asking, yes, how would you like to promote this book? Would it be any different than your other projects?
I don't think I have ever really promoted my project.
So you will treat the book in the same way?
Or at least I'm not concerned with promoting my work. Maybe I'm definitely doing through my presence on Instagram, right, which is so obvious, but I guess also because of my Eastern European background, we somehow the belief, the innocent belief, which is. I mean, I guess it's also some sort of a stupid belief, is that the project itself should kind of live by itself, and I'm throwing these bricks into the world, and maybe they will promote by themselves. But again, there is, if I were to, I'm treating the book exactly like any other project, I would say.
All
I
right.
think it's more of a sharing maybe than a promotion.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
I think, because I sort of think about the Instagram for you is not about promotion, but about some sort of archiving or re-archiving of work somehow. And it becomes a collection more than a promotion. It's not like a promotional tool, I think.
Yeah. Should I?
Yes, go for it.
Is there another?
I think we're good right now with the questions, so please.
No, this is good. I think, yeah, it's a good time.
Okay. My practice of architecture operates according to no master plan. It is a form of bricolage. It lives on a daily based schedule, and it is informed by a vision that does not extend beyond the maximum of 5 working days. This probably has to do with the fact that half or more than half of this architectural practice consists of doing renderings. For the record, I like to call them collages. For those who don't know, to be in the business of making renderings means to be on deadlines all the time. Most of these deadlines are unplanned. You are a hired gun. You are on call. You work fast. You make money. Sometimes lots of money. The making of money brings me to a related topic, that of spending it. The other half of the practice is performing via design competition and unrealistic pitches. I approach each design project with a professional rigor that requires the production of many design iterations via physical models, digital models, render images, and line drawings. I spare no effort. I have a professional architectural practice. This is how I spend the money. The amalgamation of the apparently opposite dimensions, rendering versus design, digital versus analog, operating according to no master plan versus being exact about things, has meant that I have developed a practice that fully merges representation with design, a practice that has speed, a practice that strives on non-continuity, a practice that embraces accidents, a practice that is contemporary.
I think with this idea of accident, right? I think it's Agnes Varda. No, the chance is always my best assistant. You know,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead. I think chance and accident is another kind of something recurring within the fragmentation.
Yeah, I think
whether it's through the image or the model. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's also the work of Francis Bacon, just working and loosely outlining things, and then things become coherent once you make the right mistakes.
Yeah, I think I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the role of accident or chance in your design process. I think you know, having taught next to you, I've also noticed that there's a belief in like intuition, like a very strong belief in intuition as something to follow alongside kind of chance and accident. And so I was wondering, maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you think about that in the process.
I think it's I see myself more as in a way as an editor than as a straight-on designer, and I think practicing like an editor, it means that you always pay attention on what happens without you actually being the main producer. And I guess that's probably the answer. I see more of the work of an editor. I do sometimes also instigate towards certain accidents and towards certain discoveries, but there is even this encounter with different people that I think can bring so much into my work of architecture.
There's a question from Fiorella Granda. asking if you think there's a certain way in which your book needs to be, you want your book to be experienced, because there are multiple perspectives possible. How do you see that?
The book should be, it's written in a way that can be opened at any page, and you can start the book. So I guess by that there is some sort of metaphysical aspiration that there is no beginning. There is this perfect circle, that you never exhaust the book. But I do. My hope has always been to make out of it a novel, some sort of a story.
Adrian, I have a kind of unrelated question, but one that I want to ask you, and you may not like the question, but you mentioned this idea of the contemporary in that last chapter, and I know that you're skeptical of generalities and of groupings, of like neo-pomo, post-digital, etc. But I would like to know more about whether or how you maybe locate yourself in the field of architecture, or if you have any kind of generational alignments at all.
I think my advantage is that I was educated in Europe for about 6 years, and in a pretty rigid environment. And at the same time, I was also able to experience another type of education by taking the Master of Urban Design at Daniels, and working with characters such as Robert Levitt, Rodolphe El-Khoury, Pierre Bélanger, Mary Lou Lapsinger, John Schneer. And then I was very fortunate to work in Toronto, so in North America, but also to work in Europe, both in Romania, but in the Netherlands as well. So I think because of that, I gained multiple perspectives into the profession, and sometimes these multiple perspectives haven't been very productive because they have just enhanced my criticism. But I see my work, I have an affinity for the work of Jimenez Lai, Andrew Kovacs from the West Coast. I am also incredibly impressed by the work of people such as Fala or Baukunst, Baukuch, and then I'm also still in love with the work of current work of Bofill, and there are so many. I don't know. There are so many good things out there that it's just impossible to make a decision.
Well, I think this really sounds like a beautiful, almost like a mission statement, why you don't want to belong to any particular group. I think we should start to wrap up. There's one more great question, which probably will make you feel a bit uneasy, which is, if given the chance to build a project, what would the ideal build project be?
Any project. Just give me a project.
Well, I think this is kind of perfect conclusion,
That's a good way to wrap up. Yeah.
we can end this discussion. Thank you to Adrian Phiffer and Tei Carpenter for joining us for this Daniel's talk, Strange Primitivism and Other Things. Thank you all for attending, and special thanks to the Daniel's Public Programming Committee for organizing this year's series. And to see the rest of the events, you can go to the Daniel's website and news and events. And the next event in this series is the Great Indoors Environmental Quality, Health and Well-being in Quarantining Society. And it's coming up on Thursday, October 1 at 6:30 Eastern Time. We hope to see you then. I wish you all a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Adrian.
Thank you, Tei, so much. Thank you, Hans, and thank you to everyone.
Thanks, Hans.